Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Just wanting to make some comments that hopefully will be useful for you regarding Pluto going direct very, very soon, just in a few days' time. And just generally what's going on with all the energies at the moment. It's pretty intense times, to say the least. Wonderful energy for deep personal transformations, but with any transformation, we have to really go into a process that feels like it feels like a death. It feels like something is being removed, which is Pluto. Pluto contributing, reflecting, creating this. The soul, you, the soul. And it's not an easy process by any means, but I just want to kind of share with you guys today, just through my own personal experiences, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, just to use a cliche kind of analogy. So look, where I want to start is I just want to start with just some beautiful things that are happening at the moment. We have the new moon in Libra coming up, which I've already done a video on, so please watch that if you want to hear more information on that. The point that I want to mention, though, is that this new moon, as I mentioned in that video, is conjunct the goddess Isis. And I titled that particular video, Recovering Aspects of Your Own Self. This is a very important time at this moment when we are ready to step into this new moon, because of this Isis energy and just her vibration enabling us to access more authentic, more aligned components of who we are, as opposed to fragmented, lost components or projected components. That is frequently the case as we continue to experience our journey in life through all the different relationships we have. Now, this new moon is in Libra, so the whole vibration of this new moon is specifically correlating to our experience in relationships and in relationship to ourselves, of course. So, as I said, watch that video if you want some more information. Now, the other thing that's going on, which I just put a post in my community section earlier this morning, but I just want to touch on it briefly. It is very important, and some of you may or may not be interested in this. It's up to you. However, if you are interested in working with what I like to call the divine feminine energy, which comes through in many, many different forms, in many different ways, depending on which culture, which esoteric or philosophical or even religious type of background you're actually looking at. So at the moment, we have what's called the Navratri festival taking place, which is a Hindu celebration for the goddess Durga, Durga. And she has 9 avatars or 9 expressions of who she is. Now, this is a very, very powerful festival. When it happens 4 times a year, but the largest one that's most recognized is the one that's taking place now, which started today for us in the Southern Hemisphere, which is the 29th of September, and it goes for 9 days and 9 nights. Navratri literally means 9 days or 9 nights. And when you are working with this goddess principle, Durga, she's the divine mother, divine feminine principle, and the divine feminine protector of the universe and of every single one of us. Her vibration is extremely powerful and really does have the ability to help us transform components in our lives that we are ready to transform, we are ready to face, we are ready to look at. It's not an easy process, so you really have to be quite committed, but you might be at a stage in your life where you're wanting to evolve, resolve, work through, heal, transform certain components of your own life. And that can extend to a number of different areas of life. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's connected to the material world as such, in the form of just the desires of the ego. This vibration really does need to be understood, felt, experienced, and approached more from a spiritual, transcendent type of level. So, this festival that's taking place at the moment, as I said, goes on for the next 9 days. You can actually Google this and find some information out in terms of what it's, what it covers, because there's a lot to it. I'm only just introducing it to you guys. It's something that I actually have been practicing the last few years. I've had 2 visits to India, and I've been to many, many goddess temples, including temples of Durga, and I've done a lot of the practices that are involved in this particular festival celebration, which is predominantly about transforming. That's what it's really about. It's a very deep process and experience if you're willing to go into it, and the ways you go into it is through chanting, meditation, and very conscious and specific focus on her vibration over the next 9 days, and really being very honest and open with yourself in terms of what you're ready to look at, what you really want to confront and release. So her vibration is strongly, she's just, that the way they describe it is that she's just come back onto the earth now, right? This is what happens at the beginning of this ceremony, celebration, festival that begins today, 29th of September. So her entrance, if you like, into the physical plane means that we have this capacity now to access her vibration in such a powerful way, in the same way that we do have the ability to access the vibration of Isis that is conjunct this new moon. So there's really beautiful, powerful feminine vibration, divine feminine vibration that is being activated at present, and it's something that you can tune into and work with if you wish to. So I just wanted to bring that in. Now, what I wanted to focus on today, as we know, Saturn recently went direct, which has been quite extraordinary for me personally in terms of what sort of brought up and showed up for me. Transiting Pluto and transiting Mars are in my 12th house, and to explain what that transit means, I would need hours to be sitting here with you, and I don't really want to go into every personal detail anyway. But I will say this, that when transiting Saturn went direct, it's actually very close to my Mars, and Pluto is right on my Mars. So I've had this Pluto-Saturn conjunction in my 12th house, pretty much on my Mars, because I have Mars in Capricorn. And those of you may or may not know, but I am a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan as such. I stay away from most animal products, but I do still consume some dairy, so I have to be honest about that. However, I don't eat any animals at all, and I haven't for many, many years. As a result of that, my iron sort of tends to fluctuate, my iron levels. But I didn't realize that until Saturn went direct just a few days ago, that my iron levels are basically zero. I had some blood tests done, and that revealed that I'm basically anemic at the moment, which is fine, because I can rectify that, and I've already started doing that. But it's just very interesting. I'm bringing this, even though it's such a personal aspect of my life, I'm bringing it to your attention because Mars, planet Mars, actually correlates to iron. Okay, literally the iron in your body. And if you do have iron issues, it's very wise to be assessing the location sign aspects to your Mars. in your birth chart, and obviously throughout your life, the transits that correlate to Mars at different times in your life. For instance, Neptune on Mars is very typical of wiping out your iron levels. I've seen that, I've had that, I know what it's like. Saturn transiting over my Mars has also really played around with my iron. So these blood tests revealed, what I've just said, and it's just very interesting that it all came to light as soon as Saturn went direct. You see, the point to this story is that when planets are retrograde, there's so much revision, reflection, revisiting, and going into unconscious levels. So you're not really in control of this process. There's a strong unconscious component that's been worked through while planets go retrograde. And there's a resolving of things going on as well. And there's things coming through the unconscious or subconscious into your consciousness, but you don't actually, generally speaking, the dots are not connected until that planet goes direct, which is a very simple example is the one I gave with my iron issues at the moment. So now we are talking about Pluto going direct on the 3rd of October. It's been retrograde since 25th of April of this year. So Pluto is direct, half the year, every year. This is a very important process because in terms of EA, evolutionary astrology, we understand that Pluto correlates to the soul and the soul's unconscious desires and the soul's evolutionary path and intentions. So when Pluto goes retrograde, which it has been for the last 6 months, we have all personally and collectively been going through a process which has required us to really examine and unconsciously tap into a lot of different blocks, long-standing imprints, attachments, structures. Remember, Pluto's in Capricorn, Saturn's in Capricorn too. So a lot of the sorting through, the resolving through, the clearing out really does pertain very much to the Capricorn archetype, which is our own sense of structure and reality, the reality that we have created for ourselves. The patriarchal systems that we've been subject to for thousands of years, and everything that then reflects in our own personal evolutionary journey. So Pluto going retrograde is, every time it goes retrograde, because obviously it's been in the sign of Capricorn for quite some time, we still have a few years left. Every time it has gone retrograde, it has taken us back into these internal solid structures that we have created. And it is giving us an opportunity each time to assess and to break down what it is that needs to be broken down in terms of what is stifling our evolution. So when you have Pluto transits, I mean, every transit could be said to have this particular meaning, but especially with Pluto, Pluto's transits reflect the timing of the soul's evolution. So you might have had, a really powerful transiting, Pluto transiting one of your personal planets 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. And you may have had, some pretty intense transitions or transformations, or a lot of resistances, because depending on where you're at in terms of how able you are to step into the transmutation, the transmutation, your evolution, that's going to determine how you actually integrate, the transit of Pluto. So the Pluto going retrograde and direct is part of this picture. It's part of this picture of what transiting Pluto is taking you through in this current life. So the direct movement that we're going to have in a few days' time is probably already started for some of you. It certainly has started for me. It's shown me what what it's been doing the last 6 months that has been extremely powerful, because it's literally been in my unconscious, because Pluto's in my 12th house. So it's always a lot more difficult to see very clearly what transits in the 12th house will ultimately produce. So it's when planets go retrograde, where things, pardon me, when they go retrograde and then they go direct again, that's when you might see some clues and some tips and be able to sort of connect the dots, if you like. And then again, it just depends on what else Pluto is aspecting in your chart, and it depends whether you're resisting the transformation, the evolution, or whether you are able to embrace it and go with it. Now, when we resist it, it brings about emotional shocks. There are three impulses, according to Jeffrey. There are three impulses in terms of reactions that we have to the evolution that Pluto sort of takes us through. And then there are also four distinct sort of stages that we may experience. And I'll actually tell you what they are, because it is useful to understand them. So before I talk a little bit more about Pluto moving direct, these are just some of the things that you might want to consider when you're actually looking at Pluto moving direct on the 3rd of October, where it is, first of all, where is it transiting in your natal chart, and also taking into account the polarity, right, the opposite house of where Pluto is at the moment in your chart, because that's going to draw in further experiences and understanding and what's trying to come into your conscious awareness as well. So the three evolutionary impulses are, the first one is you either resist the evolutionary karmic sort of intentions altogether, or you respond. Number two is you respond to them with wholeheartedly, with a desire to understand what the lessons are in this life for you. And the third one is a combination of the two. Essentially, you are willing to change in some ways, yet in other ways you are resisting certain dynamics as well. So those are the three ways that we actually, the way our impulse reacts or responds to the evolution of Pluto, which is connected to natal Pluto in your chart, and as well as the transits that take place and progressions as well, really, for that matter. Now, the four ways that Pluto affects evolution in our lives in this way. So the first way is it's really intense. It's a really intense experience because there's so much underlying resistance to the change that is trying to give birth to your life, which is about letting go, dying, releasing old ways, structures, behaviors, modes, emotional patterns, behavioral patterns, psychic memories, patterns, trauma, all sorts of things, and a whole range of things that exist within you that really pertain to so many different lifetimes, not just this one. So the first way is a cataclysmic way of experiencing Pluto. Just wait for this police car to go. So this can be a really, really super intense experience, to say the least, and extremely painful because it's cataclysmic. You know, cataclysmic is like, it's catastrophic. It's not tickling you. It is pushing. It's a volcano basically exploding, right? It's really intense. But when this happens, the evolutionary leap that subsequently unfolds is massive. It changes the soul's path moving forward. It changes the person's life. And I personally have had this experience not very long ago. And I can tell you now, it is literally dying and being reborn. It's the most intense experience. So that's the first one. The second one is that we create situations in our life and therefore attract a number of different things. Could be a person, could be a relationship, it could be a new path that we venture into, whether that's through study or spiritual seeking, or just reading new books. It can be absolutely anything. And the key component to that is we are perceiving that there is something we need to further understand and realize and know. So there's this seeking of creating new forms of relationships to something or someone, because we realize that this is going to aid to our deeper sort of understanding and awareness. So that's number 2. And I'll just read this comment here because it's very interesting. The psychological process involved here is one of osmosis, Pluto in brackets. By forming the relationship, we absorb into ourselves that which we need, right? This is point 2, okay? A simple example of this is this. You are now reading this book that you bought because it was relevant, sounded interesting to you. You might have just bought a book, last week, and it was interesting, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the process that you go through now, through this particular stage, in terms of your evolution, is extremely powerful, because through the process of osmosis, you're basically learning something entirely new to your soul's evolution, in terms of what your soul is desiring to know and understand at this point. So there's a transformation that takes place through this learning and this growth, which is non-cataclysmic, as opposed to the first one that I stated, where there was emotional shocks involved and deep processes of death and rebirth and so forth. The third one is producing or creating situations in our lives which we become aware of some external or internal source of stagnation or limitation, which blocks us from any further growth. And this process is quite different to number 2, which involves no particular crisis. It is simple yet steady growth. So let me just have a look at this. So number 3 essentially just makes us very, very aware of either an internal or an external block that we know we need to basically work on. So the focus of our attention can be so intense that everything else in our lives is excluded until we figure out the source of the block, okay? This process is extremely similar to the dominant volcano that suddenly turns active. At some point, an eruption will occur that has an effect of transforming the volcano and its surroundings. So we become aware through the knowledge produced in the eruption of what the block is. As this occurs, we evolve because the source of the block has been removed. So the 3 stages I've read so far are all extremely powerful. They just show up in different ways, okay? The 4th one, which is the last one, is it's very interesting, because basically what it points to is what we could say, there's an awareness that is triggered within you of some capability or capacity that you have that's been latent, that's been lying dormant. It's a wonderful power of some sort for you. And through internal or external conditions, it gives birth to some new impulse, idea, or thought, or desire. So it's a process of actualizing or developing the new capacity, which creates an evolutionary growth or growth effect. So those are the 4 ways that your evolution at any given moment can be unfolding as reflected through Pluto. And then there were the three reactive impulses that I mentioned in the beginning as well. So keep these points in mind when you're actually looking at transiting Pluto at the moment, going direct on the 3rd of October at about, I think it's about 20 degrees of Capricorn. So think about the last 6 months, what's been showing up for you, what's been unfolding, as it were. What has your attention gone back to and revisited, reinvestigated, or what more understanding have you been able to attain over the past 6 months due to your life circumstances? How can you fit those 4 different ways, or any one of those 4 different ways rather, and then the 3 sort of impulses to what's been happening? So in other words, have you been resistant? Have you been able to step in wholeheartedly and take on what's been asked of you to transform, transmute, osmose? Or have you done a bit of both? You know, in some ways you've sort of taken that leap or that step and embraced, and in some ways you've still had some resistance to other things. That's a very typical response for most of us, I think. And then the 4 stages, you know, it could, if it's been number 1, then you've had really severe emotional shocks, which have basically probably been very traumatizing and created probably intense grief and pain in your life. Or have you discovered something really powerful within yourself that's been sort of latent, it's been there in the background, sort of hidden in your unconscious, and it comes into your conscious awareness now, and you're able to proceed forward in your evolution? And by the way, with all of this that I've just said, you must also figure out at what stage of evolution you're at in terms of the 3 stages that Jeff talks about: the consensus state, the individualized state, or the spiritualized state. So, and there's sub-state periods as well, just to make it, you know, a little bit more complicated. But for a start, I think it's important just to identify which of those 3 stages you are at in your own evolution. It is most likely that if you are even listening to this video, you are in the individuated state, most likely. If you're, you know, if you're part of the consensus reality, and this is not a judgment, this is just how it is, then it is most likely you would not be interested in this material, in listening to any of this anyway. So those are some things to consider. Now, when Pluto goes direct on the 3rd of October, well, and just another comment I'd like to make, as it's been retrograde the past 6 months, it's been connected to the things I said in terms of this internalized process of reviewing, revisiting, reflecting, reliving, going deeper into structures, Capricorn structures. Saturn's there too, in Capricorn, structures that are no longer necessary or useful for your evolution. So the clue to understanding where you're at is the more resistance you have to what's trying to exit from your life, the more you are obviously not ready, for whatever reason that is, or able to step into that experience of evolution. So that the natural response is to be resistant, okay? The other thing is, when Pluto is retrograde, it's like saying that the soul is throwing off or liberating itself from mainstream consensus conditioning and patterns in general. So it's an opportunity every time Pluto goes retrograde to enable us to step out of this model of reality that is projected onto all of us and step into deeper soul structures within ourselves that we need to understand further, explore further, and find ways of understanding what it is that your soul, everyone's path is completely different. There's no right or wrong in any one path. We're all just unique, period. So wherever you're at, you are at. But this retrograde period enables you to get a sense of where you're at, because the way you get a sense is you will see what's going on in your life. The events and circumstances and people and situations that are part of your life at the moment are an expression of where you're at from an evolutionary level, where you are growing, how you are growing, and so forth. And when Pluto is retrograde, we have this opportunity to experience internal revelations, internal transformations at the deepest unconscious levels. And it's not a left brain thing. You can't understand this stuff from the left brain. I mean, you can to a certain extent, but the experience is not a left brain experience. First of all, it's a soul experience. It's an evolutionary experience, and it all speaks to your progression forward through life, your evolution. Evolution means so many different things. We use that word fairly loosely, but evolution it really encompasses and embraces so many different things, because it speaks to every single life that you have had and the life you are having. So you can see just from that how much it speaks to for you personally. So Pluto going direct in a few days' time is going to be a very powerful process in our own individual path moving forward, pertaining to our own experience and level of evolution, depending on where we are at the moment. And this all coincides very closely to the new moon in Libra, conjunct Isis, relationships, understanding oneself, understanding others, understanding with Isis there. Remember what I said about Isis. In her myth, she was her husband was murdered and chopped into 14 pieces, whatever it was, and she was desperately trying to find all his bits and put him back together. She found all of them but one, the male genital area, the area that defines a man, you could say, the male principle from that level, and that was the one part she couldn't find. And therefore, that in turn reflects that each of us need to find the feminine and the masculine within our own self, regardless of our gender. It's a very important process of becoming whole, integrated, individualized, individuated, right? So we've got that going on. We've got the Navratri festival of Durga, and she's the principle of transformation. And then we've got Pluto, the ultimate source of transformation, going direct in a few days' time. So you can see the energies are all speaking to this process of literally breaking down old realities, internal structures that have been created through Saturn. Saturn is what creates structure in our reality. And at different times, it creates a particular type of reality that may be conducive to what we need in our life at that time. But that reality needs to continuously grow, evolve, and change in form, because nothing in life is permanent. Everything changes its form, okay, through time, through evolution. That includes every single human being, animal, the earth herself. She is evolving. Everything is transmuting, if you like, in its own individual way and process and cycle of life, or cycles of life. So wherever you are at, and whatever this transiting Pluto conjunct transiting Saturn in Capricorn has meant for you. Don't forget, I said in my Saturn-Pluto video that this is by far one of the most challenging pairs of planets to be conjunct each other in a very it's a challenging sign from the point of view that it pertains to deep paternal structures in our psyche that have been imprinted over thousands of years. But Pluto, if Pluto is the ultimate source force to transformation, then it is Pluto that has the capacity, that enables us to have the capacity to smash through and break through these walls of resistance that we have inbuilt in our own self, in our own psyche, which is mostly unconscious. And Saturn's going to want to hold on to the structure, resist the letting go, and Pluto is just going to keep reminding you, no. If you have the enormous resistance to it, it's going to bring about emotional shocks, really intense emotional shocks through experiences that will be catastrophic. It's just the nature of how Pluto works. If we are so stagnant and so boxed in and so blocked, we cannot move from that unless there is a massive shaking up of our world, right? And that can be the removal of something or someone. And it goes deeper than that, because if it is a person that is removed, that story of you and that person can go back into many, many different lives. So it's very complex. There's a lot of different layers, but these are just a few tips for you guys to consider for now, and as you observe Pluto moving direct from the 3rd of October, because it's going to feel, potentially, it should feel like a relief in a way, because it has been extremely intense while it's been retrograde the last 6 months. It forces us to go into the unconscious, an area that we don't naturally visit on a conscious level. On a conscious level, day to day, we're just going about our business, thinking that what we see and what we're sort of doing is that's kind of it, but it's not. Most of what's the most powerful transformations that at least are being instigated are all happening in the unconscious, okay? And it is the timing of these transits in your own chart, or planets moving retrograde and direct, that can be the points of trigger, okay, that reflect the timing of what you need to know right now, what you are ready to work through right now. So have a think about all that, and feel free to comment below and ask any questions. Thank you to all of you for continuously supporting and engaging in the community section as well. I have to say that probably the last 2 weeks, it's sort of all come to a head, as it were, in the most powerful way. This Pluto Saturn has been the main body source of the biggest transformations in my life, which started 2.5 years ago, and it's still going. And it's just freaking mind-blowing. It's out of this world. It's truly transcendental experiences. I'd love to know what you guys are going through and experiencing. Feel free to share, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Sending you all so much love and so much blessings. And if you're going through a hard time, send you extra love and extra blessings. And see you soon. Thanks.